Our next introducer is going to be Amani Abare, who is going to introduce Mohamed Zakariya.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Amani Abara, an interior design student at VCU Qatar. Today, we are honored to have a speaker whose rich experience and deep vision will enlighten us to the lore and true art of Ottoman Arabic calligraphy. Our speaker has received ijazats or diplomas in Islamic calligraphy under the auspices for the Research Center of Islamic History, Art and Culture in Istanbul, Turkey, and was the first Westerner to do so. Since 1972, he has traveled frequently to Turkey and the Persian Gulf and has exhibited and lectured extensively all over the world. He concentrates primarily on classical Arabic and Ottoman Turkish calligraphy. He's best known for his design of the Eid Greetings US postage stamp. Recent experience includes a stint as artist in residence at the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art in Honolulu, solo exhibitions at the Institute for Works on Paper, San Francisco, and group exhibitions in Dubai and Kuwait. Our speaker believes, and I quote, that Islamic calligraphy is neither a representational art nor an abstract one, but something entirely other. A living, evolving art of the word, of meaning itself. He's a master of Arabic calligraphy and will be speaking to us on Murakka, the Ottoman calligraphic album and its role in establishing the international style. Please help me in welcoming none other than Mohamed Zakariya.
Thank you all for coming to this event, and thanks, of course, to the great sheikhs of Qatar and to Sheila and Jonathan and to Aisha al-Khater, who worked double time to have both my exhibition and this event, and to Oliver, whose idea it was in the first place, and to Franak, who helped us to find all the parts and put the parts together, and Marissa, who herded all of us cats together, and to Andrew, who is allowing us to actually function electronically. First of all, let me see if I can start it. Ah, yes. It's over the margin a tad. Is there any way we can shrink it back down into the border area? Let me see. I don't want to lose all of my margins. Oh well, let me go ahead with it. We've seen that one, and we have this one. I saw these first in '64, and later I saw both printed versions and all sorts of these little paintings, and they kind of got me into this work, and so when I'm seeing them, I'm always thinking of how I got going with it, and we can sort of imagine how these pieces form the kind of the character of the simple Ottoman art, you know, not the magnificent, glorious type of art, but a simple little home art, a thing that makes you feel comfortable, makes you actually want to go there. And this is on the way to the heart of the faith. So, in these little towns, Mecca and Medina, the script of the Arabic script, it was born and it began. And at the time, there was a few people around who could read, maybe 10, 15, accountants mostly and scribes. And it was a simple way of writing, not fully understood, yet poised to take off on a direction that is still going. And there are a number of hypotheses regarding where these writings come from, but at the time of the Prophet of Islam, it was actually a functioning system. I'm going to be a little elementary here. Most of you know all these things, but it's part of the story. If we look at the samples from the Holy Relics Room in Topkapi, I think we can get some idea of how writing was being done in those very, very early stages. Now, let's see what happens. Ah, yes. This is Surat at-Takathur, and we can see a very sticky kind of writing, like it's made from matchsticks put together. This may not be actually a genuine piece, but it may have been copied from one that was. It has the makings of what we like to think is an early script. There's also prophetic letters there, and maybe they're all real, maybe not, but they seem consistent with some of the papyrus works, and if even these pieces are fakes, they may be copies from the originals. Wait a minute now. Yes, okay. Let me go back to that a second. Which is the backward one? This one? Yeah, okay. Let's leave that there for a minute. The story of how calligraphy went from these elementary states to the pinnacle of achievement in the 19th and 20th centuries is one of the extraordinary examples of the evolution of an art. To call it an art at this early stage is very premature, since practicality as a writing system transcends its place as a vehicle of beauty. The evolution took place over a period of roughly 13 or 14 centuries, with peaks and plateaus, periods of stable progress and stagnation, but always recovering and moving higher. Let me give some background to the evolution and what led up to our subject, the Ottoman Morocco album, and how the album itself was to pave the road of development. But first, let's note some roads that led elsewhere. There we go. The two distant worlds of Chinese Islam and North African Andalusian Islam also provided areas where great calligraphic art was created. This piece, incidentally, is right here in Qatar in the Calligraphic Museum, Sheikh Hassan's Calligraphic Museum. And when I first saw it years ago, it was hanging upside down. Nobody knew what it was. And actually, it's Nun wal Qalam. And if we look, this is the big Nun, and this is the Wa, and Al Qalam, and the Lam for it is ingenious because it comes down to a single stroke like that. And so, actually, no, that's the Nun right there. But it's done rather big with a very dry brush, and it has to be one of the most spectacular examples of Chinese Islamic calligraphy around. It's fully Chinese, fully Islamic, and it's a perfect an amalgam of both features in its alchemy in ink. I think there's nothing like it. The other extreme, the counterbalance, is here also in the Doha Museum, and this is a Maghrebi Quran. One of the more spectacular examples. It's, let's see. This piece gives us a picture of the rich and continuous field of innovation that developed out of the West Wing of Islam, perhaps freer from an artistic viewpoint than the more official and regulated styles of the Islamic heartlands. In this approach, the writing and the book layouts are unique, and although the artists and craftspeople played with Eastern themes occasionally, perhaps with a touch of parody, at its best, this calligraphy of Western Islam owes little to the East, save its actual origins. Then, the writing art and Scrabble practice were part of most Muslim societies wherever they were. In their works, we can see the split-level vision, the practical Scrabble writing, and the various approaches to artistic calligraphic writing. This is an oversimplification, of course. The subject is complex, and we cannot find firm answers to really complex questions. We don't even know the names of these very early scripts at all yet. Most extant early manuscripts are written in ways that do not conform to the canonical styles, the 6 styles or more, but often are influenced by them. So it is useful for the student of the history of Arabic script writing to consider both the official styles, the canon, and the more or less vernacular individual ways of writing. It is a convenience that gets us into deeper issues. Now, another page of that. If we look at this, we see such rhythm and direction in here. You know, a lot of Maghribi writing kind of falls flat, and a lot of other writing also sort of falls flat. But in this one, it's just like a whirlpool of action. But now we come to this one. When I saw this the first time I was here at the museum, I saw something that we don't normally see in this style of writing. Now, actually, I think we're not getting the full direction, Andrew, from this way. Is there any way to get what's missing out in here? I think it's cropped, yeah. Can't do it. Okay, well, we will do it as best we can. With writing like this, we begin to see the artistic and masterly control of the pen, and that's what calligraphy is all about. The reed pen can simply be a marking stylus, or it can come to be an instrument that takes as much time to learn as a musical instrument. With this kind of work, and these pages here are on view at the MI there in the gallery on the, I think, second floor. We see the birth of Arabic script penmanship, the transcendence of art over practicality. Unlike the freedom of the Maghribi scripts, these are harbingers of the classical scripts from Iraq. Almost every letter is manipulated by the pen, and in lesser hands than the one who wrote this, we see minimal or uninspired manipulation. By manipulation, I mean a pen cannot make by itself that round loop. This is not normally made by a pen. All of these shapes, this one, you have to do a lot of doctoring with the tip of the pen in order to do that. Thickenings. The most interesting one is the thickening we see of this aleph. Now, a normal aleph is going to come down with that pen only about there. So whether he starts here and goes up and comes back and fills it in, or comes down and backwards and fills it in, whatever it is, there's a lot of doctoring going on in here. In other words, he's just not writing it, but he's drawing it. And because of that, real motion begins to take place. And here I'm not talking about little bits of decor, but structural design engaged to impose visual concepts of motion and stasis, weight and weightlessness, flow, muscularity, texture, surprise, and joy to be merely to make it better than just plain writing, transforming it into something bigger. Here the work is not micro-perfect. You see all sorts of little starts and stops here, but it's fast and it's subtle. The thickened sweep of the aleph's hook, normally a pen width, imparts resolve and drive. Other such moves abound. The writing was quick enough that we can read the writer's moves almost as though we were watching him. This has to be counted as one of the highest examples of this kind of writing, for which we really don't have a name. But we can say by the 3rd Islamic century, writing had developed a high-end version written by people of note and which we call calligraphy. Fend al-Khat, we're just plain al-Khat, Hat Sanati in Turkish. Obviously, the presence of a high-end product written by known specialists producing sumptuous mushafs demonstrates the burgeoning presence of a connoisseur culture that understood and appreciated it. I assume that while all this writing of these so-called Kufic manuscripts was steamrolling through the cities, another concept of writing existed for the non-Quranic level, and that these scripts had developed from the kind of writing we see in the Arabic papyruses. I'll go one, and again, look at the prominence of the thickness of this. It has such an effect on the drive of the script. Here we see, if it was a little clearer, we would see kind of a fishtail here where the start was not exactly in the same place. That's part of the action here that's very interesting. But this is a papyrus, and let's see now. It's entirely possible that the so-called Eastern Kufic scripts, or the New Style, and even the Maghribi family of scripts emerged from this simple, supple scripts that were used in the papyruses. They were not necessarily organized or codified. It is likely that the courts and divans and the businesses of the central zone, these modes of writing were being arranged into a hierarchy of value and prestige written forms, becoming Muhakkak, Thuluth, Rehan, Tawki, Rika, and Nasikh, the so-called 6 scripts and their 40 or so derivatives. This is the so-called Eastern Kufic. I think they all came from that papyrus. In the story of calligraphy, 3 names are pivotal. Of course, Ibn Mukhla, conspicuous, but no example of his work has been identified. We move on to Ibn al-Bawab. Let's see if I have a picture of that. Yeah, what a pity, they're all cut off in half. We all know this piece anyway.
Check again.
Let's go back. Can we go back a few?
Go back a couple of slides just to show what we were supposed to see.
Yeah.
This is your slide, and
Okay.
this is your next slide here.
Okay, where's the back one? That way, okay. Okay, that's great. Okay, now here we get the whole effect. And we can see that number one, the pen's width was very, very big. It's a rather fat pen. Probably the guy who was writing it was sitting holding it up on his knee, and the writing would run down, as Professor Darosh was saying the other day. The writing is a heavy earth pigment with lots of very oddball chemicals in it, and it would run down a bit, leaving thinner spots on the top. This is the flesh side of a piece, but we can see not only did he round that up, but all the endings, he took the tip of his pen and drew a little curve there, which was originally called the tarwis, or the heading, and that term became other parts of, in other scripts later on. There's more of this. Oh, okay, wait a minute. Yeah, that one, there we see the whole page. We see the beautiful margin. Without a margin, calligraphy, it doesn't make sense. You have to have a field for it, and the margin has always played a very important part in that. That we saw. This is the full thing. This is interesting because this is the whole Fatiha and the beginning of the Quran, and we also notice in this an item that Yasser has spoken about and written about, that what is the new way of spelling the Quran that came up in the early Abbasi period. And he's the only one I know who's done work on this, but it's a field for a lot of investigations, because it's the spelling of the Quran. These issues are causing some interesting rumpuses right now. This is Ibn al-Bawab's Quran. It is, let's say, Ibn al-Bawab, who died in 1022. Rather than an inventor, it makes a lot more sense to consider him an artistic writer who was far ahead of his peers, an artist by nature. He used to paint the ceilings of buildings before he took up calligraphy. He would lie on his back, and do the work. He had a distinct vision for defining the characteristics of the different scripts, but in an early kind of way. This is clear from the famous Mus'haf, this one, from the Chester Beatty, possibly the earliest example of a 100% definition of the very famous Raihan or Rayhani script. It is entirely the work of his hand, including the illumination, in short, a masterpiece of the art. Ibn al-Bawab had the distinction of being a highly intelligent observer of human psychology, especially in relationship to teaching, and that's seen in his really trenchant and interesting work, Rhyming in R, which you can get a translation on my website. This is a tiny little book, and this Raihani script is sometimes mistaken for Naskh, but it's not. All the tops of the verticals have a tarwis on them. Naskh does not. The letters are longer, and they're mursal, and the voweling is written with the same pen that the structure of the writing is done with. Those are the true characteristics of Raihani. So, in other examples that we have of his, whether they're actually genuine or not, are following in this. And then when we see the script maturing in Yakut's time, we see these characters harmonized and regularized. Now, We move to Yaqut al-Mustasimi, who died about 300 years after the death of Ibn al-Bawab. He was a school that people followed, Ibn al-Bawab. People followed him, especially in Egypt, and all the great Egyptian works remained under his influence until quite a late time. This is a writing by Yaqut in Yaqut's, oh, wait a minute now. This is also the Raihani of Yaqut. And so we can see, in comparison with Ibn al-Bawab's Raihani, we can see how open it's getting. There's a lot of spacing between the letters. You know, in Ibn al-Bawab's are kind of jammed up together. In this, they're beginning to breathe. They're beginning to get separation, which is a very, very important part of calligraphic art. In this work, we see the culmination of Baghdad period's evolution of the 6 scripts. With him, many features of later book writing and production became established, writing with the slant-cut pen. Ibn al-Bawab's pen was almost flat on top, and with Yaqut, it was cut at quite an angle, and that gave you less fatness on the horizontal line and more slimness on the vertical, as we can see. Nice, slim verticals. And it also gave you a little bit more speed in the reading and motion towards the left, I'm sorry. After the students of Yaqut left ruined Baghdad, there were a number of them, 7 or so, Ergun Kamili, Ahmed Suhraverdi, so forth. They spread out to teach his methods. The great movements of calligraphy began to form, both the Iranian and the Turkish one. And since my specialty is the Ottoman Turkish approach, I'll have to confine myself to that development. That brings us to our subject here. About 150 years after the death of Yaqut, another star of calligraphy rose in north-central Anatolian city of Amasya. Amasya was the home of many distinguished calligraphers, as were the founding towns of the Regent, Çorum, Merzifon, and Tokat. But it was Sheikh Hamdullah, who died in 1520, who was able to make the most indelible marks on the beginnings of the art. His name was Hamdullah ibn Mustafa Dede, also called Ibn Sheikh. His father was a Sufi sheikh. The sheikh himself, he was actually the sheikh of the archery guild, and he studied with the name calligraphers of his time and location. He was a multi-talented man. He was an archer, an athlete, a swimmer, tailor, cook, you name it. He did a lot of stuff. Lived to quite an old age. His work was of the high but not extraordinary caliber until somewhere around 1485, Sultan Bayezid II encouraged him to develop a new way to write and appreciate calligraphy, an experience that made him the subject of legends. Now we come to Morocco. Albums have played a role in the book arts of Muslim cultures from an early period. Most of them are assemblages of separated works. The Ottoman Morocco album was a little different, especially a specialty book, a teaching book, a collection book, an object in itself. These albums seem to have come into existence in their present form around the later part of the 15th century. Possibly they are connected to the calligraphic scene in Amasya, a town which has been called the Alembic of Ottoman culture. In 1481, Sultan Bayezid II invited Sheikh Hamdullah to come to Istanbul, where he soon began his revision and reconstruction of the Arabic script writing. In achieving this, we can say that he was sort of the godfather of the international style. By this period, Ottoman preferences in books and texts were being developed. Mushafs, anams, and anam is something we have some in the collection here at the MIA. It is the Surat al-Anam with several other shorter surahs that people like to keep as recitation guides, and they often had some neat illustrations in them. Manuscripts of all kinds, kitas and maracas. The leva, a larger piece to be displayed, had not yet been worked out. The book arts were up and running, cultivating, seasoning and selecting reeds for pens, paper and ink making, procuring pigments, the whole apothecary of book chemistry. In addition The arts and trades of book production were in full swing, including gold beading, illuminating, bordering, design, binding. Also active were the Naqash and the Naqashkhane, who were doing architectural work and transferring calligraphic work into buildings. Significantly, the protocols of calligraphy education also took shape here in the 15th century. Part of the curriculum was the making and uses of the Morocco album. Let me go to another one. Well, that's not one, but that's actually a Sheikh Hamdullah double page from one of his albums. One of the things we note that makes his almost always recognizable are the areas called the koltuks. These squares are almost square in his works. And his school did that sometimes too, but the koltuk is, if we can imagine, this area is your koltuk. And there's kind of an anthropomorphism going on here, but it's a very recognizable feature. And this prolific artist just was able to kind of make the classic design for this. Now, in essence, the Morocco is a collection of calligraphy that is organized around some concept. It's a book, it looks like a book, but its pages are a little different. Maracas can be collections of small works by a single calligrapher or collections of works by various calligraphers, as is the one here at the MIA. A maraca can have a random sequence of individual pieces, called ketas, or it can be designed for a specific purpose, like the lesson maracas, meshk maracasi, containing the mufredat and murakkibat exercises. We'll get into that. The basic curriculum of the beginner, we start people out with these things. A student might collect the teacher's lessons and then have them later on bound into a maraca. These collections are often dated consecutively so that we can follow on them the speed of the student's learning. There are two basic forms, the book maraca and the bellows maraca. The bellows is called curriculum maracasi. The book maraca and for sulus and nesih is held with the spine on top. This is a printed book maraca. And so when you open it, let's see, it goes like this, and you open it like that. It's the other kind would come out like that. And in both cases, they're very easy to get up nice and close so you can examine them, but the ones that come out like that are a little easier to handle. The bellows maraca is held the same way, but the pages are joined edge to edge in such a way that they can be opened all at once in a strip or folded so that two can be seen at the same time. The talik maraca is vertical in form out, bound on the right-hand edge and read like a book. The writing can be horizontal or diagonal. Each page of a maraca is called in Turkish a kita, from the Arabic qita, a fragment or a piece. Sometimes these kitas in a maraca become separated, and then they become, when they're separated, just other kitas. When we see a kita whose text is not completed on the page, you're going to run into that all the time. We can assume that it was once part of an album whose text carried on from kita to kita. Also, the kita is such a cherished and beloved format that calligraphers made countless ones, each with an integral text without any connection to ever having been part of a maraca at all. The actual kita form probably has Iranian origins, but it got simplified in the Ottoman context. A maraca can be categorized by the scripts, a sulus nesih one, a muhakkak rehani one, or a tawki rika one. These are the 6 scripts. Or by their texts, which are often mixed. Among the common texts are Quranic verses, hadiths, aphorisms, and poetry. One famous kind is the Qasida maraca, which contains an entire poem. We use those as stages in the final stage of education. Talik maracas can include mufredat and murakkabat exercises, as does this rather neat one from Mohamed Zakariya, which actually opens in the other format, but this is how it would work. Let's see. Now, specially made maracas can be read straight through from beginning to end. In other maracas, the sulus lines can be read from one after the other to the end, and then return to the beginning and read the nesic lines. These are called mutasalsil, or sequential albums. Before Sheikh Hamdullah and during his lifetime, cylindrical maracas were made by attaching kittas on their edges and then laminating them onto paper and sometimes fabric, and then roll them up and put them in scrolls. And then there was a tube that they were kept in, a nice little leather tube. Due to its awkward nature, however, this format was supplanted by book and bellows maracas. Longish format maracas are found rarely in which there is only one line of script, per page, often in the Jeli Talik. There is an example by Mehmed Zakariya in the Abdul Hamid II collection in Ann Arbor of one of these. These maracas are bound parallel to the writing. This style is called a junk, which must be an Iranian word, and has a long precedent in Persian bookmaking. The collection in Ann Arbor is probably the greatest collection of Ottoman calligraphy outside Turkey. The calligraphy for a maraca, like other formats, is done on the well-known ahar paper, that is paper that is varnished with egg alum and then burnished. It is written only on one side. The cardboard support for these pages is made by wet laminating 3 to 5 sheets onto a piece of wooden, like a wooden panel. I like to use plywood for that. The cardboard dries and it shrinks tight like a drum head. It will retain its flatness when the finished kitta is cut off from the panel. Before it is cut, the writing is pasted down on the cardboard, followed by the border strips, which can be marble paper, dyed paper, or just plain paper that's painted. Or sometimes some really interesting sort of kitschy European import papers, which had a little vogue now and then, and very interesting ones. When all this business is dry, the gold work and outlines are added and any painting is done, and finally the gold work can be stippled with a little hemispherical tool to give it what's called needle brightness. Very interesting technique. It gives it a slight 3D effect. The design in these albums became simpler than the more or less stereotypical Islamic calligraphy works with lots of blue and lots of gold. They became so that blue was not the major color. There was gold work, but there was less of it. Simpler formats became very, very, very simple. Let me see if I can find some of that. This is an example. This is, again, the Sheikh writing. The work is simple. We're going to see this line here take place in several other examples of maracas. These were copied over and over again as a part of education. I'll get to that. Let's see. To compile the maraca, the kittas from 2 to occasionally more than 100 are assembled in pairs in order to be joined by thinly skived leather bands. The unbound edges are then covered with leather bands for protection. The book block is bound, sometimes awkwardly, with which covers, but they don't have a sertab or miklab flap. Occasionally, used covers, like the one in the Sheikh Hamdullah album in Baltimore at the Walters, have a color that's been covers that are recycled from other covers. Any final touches are added, and gilding is done on the leather, et cetera, et cetera. The maraca form preserves calligraphic works and serves as a portable exhibition. Most importantly, it serves as a model for Tyro calligraphers to study. To copy from one is an amazingly effective experience. Now let's see. One piece seems to be missing. This is another one from the Sheikh. And another. This is, again, that phrase that we're going to see. This is the Sheikh doing it again. And this is in his Rehani script. And I seem to be missing something here. But we're coming here to an interesting one. This is a Tauki Rika album. And we can see this rather rarely used script. It's a script, the dimensions of which are much smaller if measured by dots than is the Sulus, although it's in the same family. These are both variants from the Sulus script. There's family things that you will notice, like where the lam starts on a vertical and things like that. That's a giveaway for that. Unused anymore, but it's very nice. I think, I wish I had that. Maybe it'll turn up. Maracas can be a curator's nightmare because of all these difficulties, especially since they've been rebordered and rebound and all that. But they can also be a collector's godsend. A fine maraca is something to be sought and admired, and I believe used. The fit and finish of a good one is revealing of the inherent quality of the work. Now, in some 20th century maracas, they're really fussy with anachronistic illumination and design. They don't feel good. They feel kind of crisp and technique-y. The less modern albums feel good in the hand. They're really nice to hold and look at, and they're tougher, and you can kind of really work with them, and you shouldn't be afraid to handle them. Let's, however, look at the characteristics for a moment of writing and what goes into the judgment and criticism of calligraphy. In what follows, I am condensing a really arcane and subtle series of concepts outlined by Mahmoud Yazir in 1952 in his famous book, Kalim Güzeli. This is coming up, this is a maraca by Kadiasker Mustafa. Is that now I come to the one that was missing. This is a picture of Shevki Effendi showing the actual position of how people used to write. They'd have their cushion, they'd have their leather socks, they'd have their toolkit with their inkwells and stuff up on the right knee with a little pad called an altlik. And that's going to be part of a story coming up. I'll tell you a joke about that. His light is coming in from over his left side, like all writers like to have. The fact that these people could sit there, hour after hour with that position, it must be an age before arthritis or something like that. But it's a marvelous picture. That's done apparently by Shevki Effendi's granddaughter, who would watch him when she was little. The questions, this is Mahmoud Yazir, one of the incredible intellects of late calligraphic theory. And he outlines 7 different qualities that are going into judging and to getting the provenance of a piece of writing. These people would be able to look at unsigned works, for instance, and by using these categories, they could usually tell who did it. Most of it was sort of instinctual, and they weren't like looking at a list like I'm looking at. But the first one was called Mekteb, or the school. This includes the type of script, the calligrapher, the era, and the place. A school has a life, a history, and it evolves. The Talik of Mir Imad, the Nesih of Sheikh Hamdullah, the Jeli of Rakam Effendi are first and foremost schools, and they are the starting point of definition. The second one is called Kol, or branch. This refers to an artist's contribution to the script and the school. Calligraphers of a certain Kol form a successive chain which carries common features. These common features function as a bridge between the style, script, and personal features of the artist's work. When we analyze a Kol, the style and the methodology should be considered separately. One can say a work by Shafiq Bey is a Kol of his teacher Kadiasker Mustafa Izzat Effendi's school. Uslub, or methodology. This refers to the ways and means by which an artist works to achieve the look, rendering them into a Kol. Tavir, or the mode of or manner. When a calligrapher's writing exhibits the characteristics of another's, that is Tavir. For example, we might say the Mus'haf written by Ismail Zuhdi has the Tavir of the Sheikh, implying that although some elements of the work belong to himself, Ismail Zuhdi, the writing mainly reflects the uslub and tarz of Sheikh Hamdullah. Shive. The Shive is conceptual. We like that. Shive, regardless of what script school or branch or methodology, style, or manner a piece reflects, many specific details and elements in it are unique and belong to the calligrapher. These elements are the shive and may not exist in every example of the artist's work, particularly when he's doing a taqlid. And here's the one that's, to me, the most opaque of them all. Hal, or state. He says, Hal is the more distinctive than shive. When the shives of different works are the same, it may be that the hal will distinguish them. Every piece of calligraphy has a hal, and the hal of a work must be understood to assess its artistic value. It's a very important point, but a little difficult to figure out. Being very recondite, we may take these concepts with a grain of salt, but they are part of the intellectual structure of calligraphic analysis and criticism. The fact that the maraca can be held close under various light sources so that the writing can be examined closely makes it an important teaching tool and shows how critical it is for the maintenance of standards and the transformation of artistic values or transmission. The great albums of Sheikh Hamdullah have been copied countless times by later students and artists, some imparting their own characteristics to the work, and some few successfully achieving genuine taqlid, making a totally identical piece. That is, all 7 characteristics of the work have been adopted by an artist who is copying it by eye, like a photographic work. I don't mean to imply here that I have been able to come close to these ideals myself. In fact, most calligraphers today are unaware of these concepts and work just as they see fit. Now, let us turn to the album here at the MIA. This is upstairs, and it's a Karuklu maraca, a bellows maraca. Some people call it concertina. And it's also a toplama maraca, which means it's a collection of works by different people. It has 17 kittas, 2 by the great Dervish Ali, 6 certainly by Nefes Zadeh Sayyid Ismail, and 2 by Hafiz Osman, and then a couple that we don't know who they are, but a person who is really good at this could tell. This is by a major artist copying exactly, this is actually really a very good taqlid of Sheikh Hamdullah, but it's not signed, we don't know. This is the beautiful rose in the koltuk, which I thought you'd like to see. It's actually about that big. This is the other one, we don't know who it is. There's a theme here, which I'll be getting to. But here we come to a work by Dervish Ali, who was one of the great formers and transmitters of the Sheikh style. Both Nefes Zadeh and Dervish Ali were teachers of the illustrious Hafiz Osman. And there are 2 pieces also by him in this collection. In addition, there are a couple of unsigned kittas, as we've just seen them, and there is an afterthought, a Talik kitta by Mir Ali Haravi, and also 3 decoupage pieces, which don't really fit in the album at all, but they're there. Dervish Ali was a very learned man who studied calligraphy with Khalid Erzurumi, who died in 1631. He wrote more than 50 mushafs, plus a lot of enams and evrads and kittas and maracas. He is considered to be the second proponent of the school of Sheikh Hamdullah. As for Nefes Zadeh, who is big in this piece, let us move ahead of that. This is another Dervish Ali. This is Nefes Zadeh. Mustaqim Zadeh, in his masterpiece, Tuhfe Hattatin, says the following. He says, he is from the city, meaning Istanbul. He is well known as Nefes Zadeh. The tally of breaths a person takes in his life is mentioned by people of insight. It is a concept, the point of which is that the one who holds his breath while moving the pen will seek to have the best acquisition of calligraphy. That was the belief at the time. Nobody does this today. He learned his Sulus Nesek from Khalid Erzurumi, and he took his license, Ijazeh, and his breath, Nefes, from him, and became unique in following the Sheikh's style. Even after learning calligraphy from Nefes Zadeh, Hafiz Osman went back to him again for a second time, starting all over again to learn the exact style of the Sheikh. If Nefes Zadeh had not had such a fat belly, he would have been able to hold his altalik, the writing pad, on his knee, he would have been able to hold it closer on his knee and practice. It would have been impossible in that case to distinguish his work from that of the late Sheikh. In the year 1679, he used up all of his allotted breaths, and holding his breath, he dove into the sea of reunion with the Lord of Mankind. Both of these calligraphers, Dervish Ali and Nefes Zadi, learned from Khalid Rumi. I love the way some of these things are phrased. When you read these old books, they're not just boring biographies. They're examples of really interesting writing style and allusions and things like that. Both of them were representatives of the Sheikh school, and both were teachers of Hafiz Osman, who was considered the next foundational stage of Ottoman calligraphy. Every good or great calligrapher is also a teacher. And from the Sheikh to Hafiz Osman, there's a change of transmission. Sheikh Hamdullah, Shukra Khalife, Pir Mehmed, Hassan Uskudari, Khalid Rumi, Nefes Zadi, Dervish Ali, Suyol Jazadi, Mustafa Ayyubi, and Hafiz Osman. It would seem that the MIA Morocco was assembled with the purpose and intent demonstrating that transmission in a small way and over a short period. I'm running out of time. Are we okay? I'm going to quickly go over the Nefes Zadeh album. This is sequential. It's based on a hadith, on the Stranger, a very famous hadith. It's very pretty. The illustrations in the borders, however, are pretty odd. There's his name, Ismail. He doesn't say his whole name, just assigns himself Ismail. There we have Hafiz Osman. Now we see a much firmer command of the pen. And we see, his sulus was not always as great as his nesik. His nesik was always phenomenal, but it's kind of up and down sometimes with the sulus. But we see this marvelous drive and clearness, and we see the breath-like flow, what is called, and then we see his wonderful crisp nesik. Also, this is very probably one by him, but it's not signed. Now, we'll keep that up there and look at that for a few minutes, because this is Hafiz Osman at his absolutely top form. Okay. Well, the calligraphic works in this album are not exceptional examples of writing and illumination. They still have a delicate and unpretentious beauty. Who knows when these pieces were first collected and who did the binding and illumination? This seems to have been, to some degree, the work of one specialist, except for the Talik pieces. All the work, including the two anonymous kittas, show characteristics of the Sheikh style. But the inclusion of the Mir Ali Kitta and the three decoupage pieces seems to have been an afterthought, and they don't add anything to the book. Nevertheless, as an object, it has a great deal of presence. The streams and branches of calligraphy then run from the Sheikh to Hafiz Osman and to others with other takes. Yet the whole enterprise was under the shadow of the great Sheikh. By the 16th century, Istanbul had become the hub of calligraphy and book production in the Central Islamic world. Students came to Hafiz Osman and radiated out from him, teaching and working. This is not to say that there were no other lines of transmission, but Hafiz Osman's was the main one. If we look at the following item, this one, from the MIA's collection, we can see why that is so. This is an album teaching only the Sulus script, has no nesik in it. It shows all the characteristics of great Sulus writing. The breath-like flow is omnipresent, along with the strength, drive, crispness, softness, and precision and elegance. Not all of Hafiz Osman's work was up to this level, but this, for his time, was the top. There are some pictures, here are some pictures of a few albums also by Hafiz Osman. But first, let's look at the rest of the pages here at the MIA. This is an exercise on the letter Ayin, where you connect the Ayin at the top with the Ba, the Jim, the Dal, and so forth. We teach these things that way. But when you actually see that, it's a little bitty thing like that. It's simply spectacular. Another page. It has these little wispy little guys floating around in there that, oddly enough, when you actually see them, don't distract. Another page. and the final page. There's the signature down there in the left. This is another piece by him, but I'm going to pass because it's kind of blurry. This is a wonderful album of Hafiz Osman's, seeing very simple, elegant, powerful marbling paper. Also, that was from a copy from the Sheikh Hamdullah, another one by Hafiz Osman. Now we come to Mahmud Jalaluddin, a couple of hundred years later. He died in about I'll come to that. Mahmud Jalaluddin, let's see. He died in 1829. In these kittas from Morocco, this is an entire Morocco I'm going to show you. He took a few pages from a Mufradat collection by Sheikh Hamdullah, and he copied and added the missing pages himself. They can be distinguished. The accumulated teaching and technical improvements have become naturalized in the work of Mahmud Jalaluddin, one of the few self-taught masters. He was a refugee from Dagestan. In the pages during the Murid Wars. In the pages of Mahmud, we see the breath-like flow of the pen, as we did in Hafiz Osman, just above. Mahmud Jalaluddin was a true follower of Hafiz Osman, probably the most important follower of him. But Mahmud, no doubt, he used Marakas by these masters to learn their style. When he devised his own kind of sulus, however, slightly larger than normal and even larger in style called Jali, he achieved complete stasis, and the work was not favored and fell into oblivion. Very rigid, unmoving kind of thing. It was an art mistake of major proportions. This first page here, this is a sheikh page. This is a sheikh page. This is the beginning of Mahmud. 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 Oh, what's happening? It's stuck.
How did you know the first two were the master and the next one?
There's little details you look for. Well, let's see if I can go back to it then. It doesn't want to travel here. I think I may have blown it. There's no steam coming here. So let's look, first of all, at these letters that hang down like that. And this one here is a dead giveaway, as is this one. There is a... Do you have a pointer there? Yeah. Okay. It is there's a kind of stuffiness about it. It doesn't flow nicely. In the Sheikh's time, of course, it was wonderful, but in 1820 or something like that, it wasn't. It was amazing, but it didn't quite fly as high. You'll see certain lines, such as these top lines, they're all a bit heavy for the modern taste. So let's move on. This one is a Mahmud Jalaluddin replacement, and so here we see a simple. It becomes like it's light. It becomes so like it's almost flying across the page. We see this is the style of the Sheikh. This is the mekteb of the Sheikh. But we have here the interpretation or the shive of Mahmud Jalaluddin in play. We have really a very modern version. It was like Hafiz Osman doing the Sheikh, but not Hafiz Osman himself. Okay. Same thing. We see the same thing. We see this beautiful curved line here. That would not have been done by Sheikh Hamdullah like that. It would have been a little flatter and maybe a little crinklier. Okay. This one has a regularity about it that also says Mahmud Jalaluddin. We see these letters here. Now, if we come to one of the sheikhs, we may be able to see a difference there. Let's see what's next. Sorry about the stuff down here. I didn't know that was happening when I took the photograph. That may have been the same one. Let's just, okay, here. This is back to Sheikh Hamdullah. We see a disturbance here with that mursal mim. It's hanging down very low. We're seeing a little tightness in here. We're seeing an unfinished area here. The tail doesn't fulfill itself, and the connection between the kef and the ayn is kind of klutzy there. This is awfully tight. This is not a criticism of the man's writing, but it is a showing you the difference between one and the other. The lam and the kaf here, this kaf is deeper than Mahmoud Jalaluddin's. This is also deeper, and the resolution curve is a little bit less hooked. Okay, let's see what. Let's go to the end. This is an interesting page, also by the sheikh. The sheikh here is quite identifiable by these very long muhakkak memes that droop down too far for anybody's taste after him. Okay. We have 20 more. So. Oh, I'm not going to go through 20. This is the sheikh again, and I think that's the last one in the album. There may be, this is the signature page written by Mahmoud Jalaluddin, where he's saying the story of how he came to copy it. And I think with that, thank you for letting me run over a little bit on my time.
Well,
Now, do I just leave it or turn it off? Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. That it's truly extraordinary to be in the presence of a master artist talking about master artists. And since we are talking about beauty, that it really is, it's wonderful to have a guide who, with such fine eyes and such fine hand.